All right, good morning again, everyone. We're going to talk about chapter 20, which we're going to talk about the legal aspects of nursing. We pretty much talked about that too also when we talked about psych the other day. So a lot of terms we will not be going back over because we have gone over them. Some stuff I will go into detail more about so you have better examples of those, and we're going to move forward. So we're going to discuss the different type of laws because that's very important. Our main thing is on the Nurse Practice Act that pretty much governs our decision making on how we do. And if you've already started looking at the modules on there, I've already posted the Nurse Practice Act for the state of Mississippi because this is where we live. I've also posted the State Practice Act for Alabama and Tennessee because some people like to go over and practice in other states. So I want to make sure that you understand and know the different laws of the different states because everybody do things differently. You want to recognize the function of the State Board of Nursing. The State Board of Nursing is who governs us, who tells us what we can and what we cannot do, make down the laws. And if you get in trouble, then they are the ones that will snatch your license from you. So we're going to talk about that as well. And I've also put that Nurse Practice Act, those laws also too on the State Board of Nursing on the module site for you guys to review. We're going to identify elements of negligence, what's considered negligence, what's considered a negligence claim. Some people can be named in different claims, and you need to know, were you negligent or was intentional or unintentional? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to discuss concerns surrounding criminal charges in nursing practice. If you do something bad, they're going to take your license. We'll talk about some of those examples too. And identify legal issues involving the medical record and documentation. And I've always told y'all that you all need to make sure that you cut those computers off when you get up and walk away from them, because anybody can have access to your login if you leave it up and chart something that does not need to be charted. And if so, then who's going to get in trouble? It's going to be you because it's up under your login. We're going to understand the legal concepts to inform consent, advanced directives, which we've pretty much been talking about that along the way. Some of these things I'm not going to go in depth because you all should be able to have rote memory because you guys got this from Miss Bridges in Nursing 1. And anything is fair game for testing from Nursing 1 all up into Nursing 4 because you all should know it. So the mother rule. Would you feel comfortable telling your mother what you're about to do or thinking about doing? We're going to talk about fraud, defaming. That's being completely dishonest, especially when you know something is wrong. If you know somebody is doing something that is inappropriate and is not the ways of a nurse, you need to speak up. Because if you don't speak up, you're no better than that nurse that's causing the crime. Invasion of privacy. Breach of confidentiality. We don't talk about our patients. We don't talk about them at home. That's not pillow talk. That's not sidebar talk. When we talk about things about pertaining to the patient, it's going to be in post-conference. And only when we do that, in post-conference, nobody's in that room but ourselves and the nurses that have taken care of the patients. We discuss it and we leave it there. We don't talk about anything on the elevator. Don't ask me nothing about your patient on the elevator, especially when we're going to lunch, because we don't know if that's the sister or the brother that's on the elevator and we talk about your patient. That's something that we do not do. And you're going to catch nurses doing it all the time, which they need to stop doing that. Second thing, also, when we get your information on your patient, when you're done with your stuff to put in doctor care, please give it to us so we can put it in the shred box. The ones that went to clinical with me the last time, I asked for that stuff up front. When you come and get your patient on the very first day, go ahead and put the stuff in doctor care. The less stuff that you have and you bring it back, we can go ahead and shred, the better off that you'll be, because if you get caught with it outside of it and somebody else get a hold to that, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble. Where does the law come from? You have statutory law, which is the most common law that affects us as nurses. So our law and our bylaws are going to come up on the Nurse Practice Act. And like I told you, I have already posted that for you so you know what the State Practice Act is here for the state of Mississippi. So it does not catch you off guard when you do something. The worst thing that you want us to do when you graduate and you pass boards is for us to look in the back of that book that you all are going to get once you graduate and you see somebody's name back there that you know. We don't want to see our name in there. And we recently just had 3 of our own students that's named us in there. One gave up their license voluntarily. The other 2 had to surrender their license because they thought they were not going to get caught. The very time you think you're not going to get caught, that's when you're going to get caught. So don't do anything that's going to get you in trouble, because you got to make sure you keep your license. You work too hard for them to have them snatched away. And you all have always heard me say your licenses are hard to get, but they're definitely easy to lose. Administrative law is the law that's made by the administration agency that has given us authority to pass the rules and regulations to run the opinion of the state statute. And that's just in a subjective area. So every facility, y'all guys always hear me say, follow the rules and the policies of your facility, because what I do at UMC may not be what I do at Baptist. What I did at State Hospital may not be able to do in at one of my other facilities. Like when I worked out at State Hospital as an LPN, I could replace a peg tube in a patient. And the very first time they told me that, I said, I can't do that. That's out of my scope of practice. But based on the policy and procedures of State Hospital, they stated an LPN can replace the peg tube in a patient if they have been competent and checked off on that. And if the stoma is a very old stoma, that means that the stoma is not going to close. So the very first time I did it, y'all, I was scared because I'm just thinking about this Nurse Practice Act that said they couldn't do that, but I had to follow the policies and procedures of my facility because they were going to cover me. So I was covered and I was able to do those things. So make sure that you're doing what you're supposed to do at whatever facility that you're working at. Where does the laws come from? You have your constitutional law, and this is by the United States Constitution and our Bill of Rights. So make sure you make yourself familiar with those. Administrative law are the rules and regulations passed by the Board of Nursing all day long. That's what we follow. They are the governing body of the nurses. If you don't know nothing else, the State Board of Nursing determines if we can keep those licenses or if they're going to take them from us. Common law, decision made by the judges in the court cases. Then you have your case law, which decision is rendered by the court in the case. If you have to go to court, this is pretty much what it's going to be. The judges are going to lay down the sentencing and everything. That's why when we go to clinicals, we make you all go back and re-document your stuff effectively and efficiently, because we're the ones that have to co-sign on it. If we're ever named in a lawsuit, I want us to be sitting pretty with our legs crossed, looking pretty and handsome and everything else in the courtroom, because we know we have not done anything wrong. I told you guys, once you assign yourself to that patient, you are a willing participant and legally bound to that patient if anything happens. So that's why we document, and we make you make changes, write this over, write this correctly to get you in a habit. So when you get your own license, that you'll do right by the patient, so you won't be named in a lawsuit or have to pay any kind of fines or fees. You have your criminal actions, which consider the harmful to the society, which that's not what we're going to do. And civil actions, private interests and rights between the individual and their involved case. So if I know somebody that is involved in a litigation and I know them personally, I can't tell anybody that Sally Sue just got named in Peter Paul's lawsuit because Sammy had messed around and he did some bad things, and so everybody got to go to court. They ain't got nothing to do with me. They ain't got nothing to do with nobody else. So certain things you just cannot do. It has to stay private. Then you have your torts. You have your intentional tort. Then you have your unintentional tort. So I'm going to give you an example of those. An intentional tort, which is deliberate, because I'm going to start there first, because anything that you're not paying attention to, that's going to be intentional. It's going to be if I have a patient that has a port, because I'm going to use an example, has a port, and I know that their needle that needed to require to access this port is a 1-inch needle, and I decide to go get a 3/4 needle because I'm too lazy to just look for a 1-inch needle. If you're not familiar with the lengths of the needles, you probably want to pull that information out so you can know the difference in those needles. And I decided to use a 3/4 needle, and that 3/4 needle is too short, and all the chemo is out in the patient's chest. That's an intentional tort. I deliberately did that. I was too lazy to do what I need to do. Now, granted, on the same hand, I'm going to use that same example. If this is a patient I have never had before, and I get a 3/4 and something accident like that happened, that could be considered unintentional. I did not mean to hurt the patient. It happened. It was an accident. It was truly an accident because I did not know what size needle to use. But that comes with experience too. So don't ever do anything that you don't and have not done before. So if it was me and I had never had that patient before, the main person that probably know what size needle is going to be the patient, especially if they've been stuck a lot of times. What size needle have they used? If they use a 1-inch, they use a 3/4. Some patients don't even know what size they use. So therefore, if you have an experienced nurse that's been doing it for a long time, they can tell you what size needle is going to better work for that port. You never want to do anything that you're not supposed to do. Another example is when I worked with a nurse that became my nurse manager. We all worked on the floor. And she puts adriamycin, and you all know what adriamycin does. It is considered a vesicant, and a vesicant can destroy the body. She allowed a doctor to bully her to push that adriamycin IV when she shouldn't have, and she knew better, okay? And the patient ended up having to have reconstructions of his arm, which was his dominant arm that he used. The hospital had to pay the cost of that, the for the reconstructive surgery. The nurse insurance was also filed for the claim because she was named in that lawsuit, because the patient could have very well lost his arm. And that's when you have a prudent nurse, an expert witness nurse, that says, well, why did you push adriamycin, and you know it's a vesicant and you can do all these things? Why did you not use the port? Well, the patient didn't have a port. They was waiting on the port, the nurse stated. And they said, well, why did you not get with the physician and tell them that? And her response was, well, the doctor was there when I pushed it. I got a good blood return, and they told me that the patient needed it. So, in turn, when the doctor was brought in, the doctor threw the nurse on the bus. I didn't tell them to do that. They knew they had to have a port. Those are your license, y'all. Don't let anybody bully you to do anything that you know that is wrong. If you know for a fact that you have to have certain things to give a patient something, do not do it. So in her thought process, she felt like it was unintentional. With technically, it was intentional, because she knew the patient needed a port. She allowed the doctor to bully her, and she caused harm to the patient. All right, Nurse Practice Act is the statute of rules that's governed by our state. Every state is different. We talked about that in psych. So if you know that you're going to go to Alabama, Tennessee, California, wherever you're going to go, make sure that you know what the rules and regulations are of those facilities before you go in and try to work. It's very important, because I would hate for you to think that you can push this medication over here in Mississippi, then you get to California and they say a nurse practitioner can push it, but you're used to pushing it because you was allowed to push it, and you lose your license, okay? Receiving license practices is a privilege. It is not a right. Just like when you got your driver's license, it was not privilege for you to get your driver's license. It was a right, because it was a right for the highway patrolman to not to give it to you, or not if they felt like that you was not safe. And the same thing with us. That's why we test you the way we test you. That's why the state board tests you, to make sure that you're safe enough to be able to actually take care of the public without harming them. How we get our license and how we enter practice. You go to school, you get the learning, you get the education that you need. You sit for the State Board of Nursing. They feel that you're competent enough to be able to take care of the patients, and they render you a license. LPNs get their license renewed on the odd year, which they should have gotten it renewed last year. No, they'll get renewed this year. We get ours renewed on the even year. So let me tell you about this. State Board of Nursing goes on their vacation the first week. It's going into the second week of December. Most employers want you to have your nurses license renewed by December 1st. Reason being, because they don't return back to January the 5th. And that's here in the state of Mississippi. I can't vouch for anybody else. So when January 1 comes and you have not got clearance and said that you can still practice as an RN, and you're practicing as an RN, you are illegally working. And if the State Board of Nursing found out that you have worked on an expired license, they will do some serious punishment to you. Now, I have put the Practice Act in there on your leisure. So if you don't believe me, then try it, and they will snatch your license. Make sure that if you know that your license expired in a year, of the year, the time that you get it, go ahead and get it renewed before December the 1st. And most employers will not let you work if you don't have it turned in by December the 1st. They will go ahead and put you on administrative leave until they're in. What the Nurse Practice Act does, it provides a definition of scope of practice of what we could do on our entry level as a nurse. It tells us at each level, so a nurse practitioner could do certain things, a MD could do certain things, and a nurse can do certain things. LPNs can't do what RNs do. So therefore, when you come to your delegations of your patients and your clients, like we did yesterday in class, you need to know what you can and you cannot delegate to your LPN. You need to know what you can and you cannot delegate to your techs. You are responsible for those patients, because we are registered with the state of Mississippi or Alabama, California, Tennessee, wherever you're going to register at. You are a registered license of that state. They can suspend or revoke your license if you do anything that you break the rules of the Nurse Practicing Act. So make sure that you are aware of those, and you will see some stories of that. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to post a YouTube link of the State Board of Nursing from December, and I want y'all to kind of like look at it at your leisure, because it is nothing to play with. They do not play about those licenses. What about an impaired nurse? If you have an impaired nurse that's hooked on drugs or whatever it is that they need to do, you need to make sure that you report them. If you do not report them, you're just as guilty. I don't care if it's Sally Sue I went to grade school with. We best friends. We spend the night at each other's house. We go to church together. Her mama know my mama. My daddy know her daddy. It does not matter. If Sally Sue comes to work impaired, I'm going to report Sally Sue because I don't need her killing anybody. Because if you have enough sense to come to work impaired, to work on patients, how I know you're not going to do the same to my mama, my daddy, my sister, my brother, or anybody else. And you need to have the same thing too. Do not feel guilty when you have to report these nurses because they cannot work impaired. All right, does your state board of nursing or your state have a rehabilitation program? Yes, we do. We do have one. However, I'm not going to tell you where it is located. That is for you to come tell me when you research the information. So you all can put that up on the discussion board as well. All right. Who knows the disciplinary action against the nurses? So Nursey is our best friend. So when you guys become a nurse, or we know if we ask y'all, have y'all taken boards yet? We're gonna know because all we gotta do is go to Nursey, put your information in there, and if a license does not pop up, then we know you have not taken boards. We also can put this information in there if we find out you've done something that you don't have any business. Nurses talk, hospitals talk. If you've done something at St. Dominic where your patient passed away and you had to go sit for a state board of nursing and you do not disclose that to your facility that you're trying to go work at now, they will not hire you because all they have to do is run those licenses and put it in there. And that is free information for registered nurses that know how to navigate that site. We can find out anything that you do. If you get in trouble with the State Board of Nursing is going to log this on here. Another reason for nursing is because people will get in trouble in one state and go try to practice in another state, and that state don't know that it got a hit on their license, especially with the compact. And it was very hard for certain states to agree to the compact to allow nurses to work state to state. And California is one of those ones that's not in the compact agreement. You have to get a California license all on its own. You cannot go to Mississippi from Mississippi to California and think that you're going to work. It is not going to happen. It is a rigorous thing. It takes up to 6 weeks to get licensed in California. My daughter just got her license to work in California when she decides she wants to do travel nursing, and she did that back in June, and she just got approved this month. That's how rigorous it is. They want to make sure that you don't have any hits on your license. No kind of hits on your job or anything like that is very, very crucial. Nurse practitioners, they do the same thing. Nurse practitioners can't go state to state and work. They follow the same guidelines that we do. All right, disciplinary action, healthcare integrity protection database. All this information is in there. If you've got a hit on your license where you did something to the patient or you caused harm, that information is dropped down in that database too. Outside of that, the doctors have a site where they, if they get caught up with any kind of Medicaid fraud, nurse practitioners too, all that stuff is down in that site, and they will lose privileges in that state that they're trying to come to practice in. Negligence is the most common unintentional action brought against a nurse is a negligence claim. An example of that was going to be if I have a patient and I have 5 patients that's come with the acuity of care, we kind of like talked about yesterday. If I have acuity of care in my patients and I have a patient that's down there that's a total care and I need to be able to change them, but I got another patient that's going bad, and then all of a sudden that patient end up getting skin breakdown. That's considered, most of them considered unintentional. You just didn't have the help and you needed to go down, but you had to take care of the patient that needed you the most. It's not like you wanted to neglect the patient, but the patient that was the high acuity, that's who you need to spend your most time with. And that happens. So we have a little bit over more now 6,000 cases of negligence, and payments are being paid out. Especially if that patient's breakdown end up becoming like a stage 3 or stage 4, the hospital is going to eat that cost. You're going to be named in a suit. Some facilities may even fire you because especially they have to pay out a lot of claims for something that needs to be done. So if you need help, please ask for help. That's what you're supposed to be working together as a team, and that's what we're grooming you all to do, is to work as a team. It is your duty as a professional to have a good nurse-patient ratio when it comes to this. We don't want to have a breach of duty. Breach of duty is something where we go in and we do something and we disclose information to somebody that don't have any business knowing anything about the patient. That's just like if I have a best friend that's on 6D and I work on 6C or 6F and I'm telling them all the business that's going on, I'm breach of duty. breach of duty. I am causing injury to that patient because I'm releasing information that do not need to be released. You want to make sure that we're doing the standard of care to our patient. We want to have a good patient ratio. We don't want to have damages or injuries that's going to occur either verbally or physically or mentally or anything like that. Your professional duty is nurse-patient ratio. Just like I said, you have the Good Samaritan Act. The Good Samaritan Act states that if you do anything that that you could take care of the patient and something happens and it was unintentionally, you'll be covered under Good Samaritan. All right. Now, people that have nurses tags, they feel like, oh, I got a nurse's tag. I don't want to stop because they're going to take my license. If you know what you're doing and you have common sense to know if you cannot help that patient, but to try to keep them safe until real help get there, you will be covered under the Good Samaritan. However, if you have a nurse's tag on your car, you are not obligated to stop. But the moral and ethical thing to do is to do, because that's what our job is, to protect and help the public, is to stop. About a year or two ago, my son was in a game and we ran up on a car accident, and I literally saw it when it happened. I got out. There was nothing I could do for this patient but to make sure that he remained calm and that nobody removed him out the car, because the way this car flipped, it was like pretty much folded up into like a pretzel. So if somebody would have tried to take him out, then they would have hurt him and most likely probably killed him or paralyzed him. So I made sure that he remained calm until the proper authorities got there to be able to get him out to help him. What about the nurse practice? It describes what the nurses do fairly. You have people that are considered expert witnesses, and they are the ones, if we have to go to court, they're going to put them on the stand and say, if you was in this situation, what you would have done. And that's the same thing that happened with this nurse when she pushed that adriamycin. When the lawyers and everything was asked, they had an expert witness that was there, and a prudent nurse would know not to push adriamycin through the vein. So that's what got her, because she did call negligence upon this patient, and that's what expert witnesses do. Now, in order to be expert witnesses, you have to be in the game for a long time. You have to be certified in those areas and pretty much know and stay up to date on the current trends of medications to be considered an expert witness. When we look at the policy and procedures, you always want to look at the policy and procedures of your the facility that you're working at. Make sure that you do not work out of the scope of practice of what they're going to do, because they will not cover you. When we're looking at the breach of professional duty, we must provide the standard of care to determine if it was not met or if it was met. If we did everything that we were supposed to do for that patient and that patient still passed away, then we did not have a breach of duty or negligence with our patient. Now, if we didn't do what we were supposed to do for that patient, making sure that they was sitting up 45 degrees when they had the peg tube feeding, to make sure they didn't have aspiration, make sure that they was not restrained or chemically restrained improperly. If we make sure that we do all those things to make sure that the patient remains safe and something still happened, we will be covered and we will not be considered of having a breach of duty. So everything has to be proven. If something happens to the point where your patient does pass away, like I said, you will be put on paid administrative leave. They will do an investigation. And if they feel that you did not do any breach or you did not cause any intentional harm to the patient, then you will be cleared of all charges and you will be able to come back to work. But in order to do that, you have to document. If you do not document, it is not done. So we will document. So that's another thing. Like I told you, we make y'all go back and reread and redo and rewrite. And it's only because we want you to be good nurses in documentation. Because if something happened, you need to be able to go back and say a matter of fact without being subjective of what's going on. So an example of that, if I have a patient that calls and they say, Alicia, I'm having this real bad diarrhea and I just can't shake it. I don't know what to do. Me, as a prudent nurse that knows how to well document, I'm going to tell my patient on the phone, well, Mrs. Sassy, you know, when we did our education, I told you that you're going to have diarrhea on the third or fourth day. So by you having diarrhea on the third or fourth day, you can take some Imodium over the counter. And if the Imodium over the counter does not work, then call us back and we can get the doctor to call you something in by prescription. Once I get off the phone with Mrs. Sassy, I'm going to go to her chart and I'm going to document. Mrs. Sassy called on Thursday, whatever the date is at this time, with complaints of diarrhea, re-educated client on original treatment, that she will receive or have diarrhea on the third or fourth day after treatment. Advised patient to she could take Imodium over the counter as prescribed, and also did we covered in our education. And if she continued to have problems, to call us back, and we will contact the doctor for a prescription. That was objective. That was not subjective. That was matter of fact. That was to the point, and I didn't put any feelings in or anything like that. I was completely what happened. That's how you need to do your documentation. If our patient have allergies, make sure they have their allergy bands on, fall bands on, name bands on, all these things. Because if you have a patient that's allergic to betadine and they go down to surgery and they put betadine or iodine on them and they have a problem, that's something that we did intentional. That's an intentional tort. We intentionally did something that was wrong, and we should not have. Okay, we cannot be around here willy-nilly not paying attention to what we're doing. We got to take care of the patient. All right. All right. So next, when we documenting, like I told you, we're going to document matter of fact, because if we have to go to court or we're calling a defamation claim, they can look in there and they can read that and say that it's a matter of fact. Lawyers would pick your stuff apart if it is not a matter of fact. So make sure that when you're documenting, that you're documenting accordingly. Did the patient suffer any damage? If any damages was done, if claims have to be paid, they have to be paid. That's why when you guys get ready to graduate, we want to make sure that you have already signed yourself up for liability insurance through NSO. NSO is not expensive at all. It's not expensive, okay? But the main thing is you want to make sure that you have the funds that you need to be able to do. If damages was caused and you were named in that claim, can you help pay that claim of whatever they said that you need to pay? Now, personal liability, each individual is accountable for their own action. I'm accountable for my action when I go. You're accountable for your action when you go. Like I said, we do not allow anybody to bully us into anything that is wrong. We follow the orders to the T. If we feel that there's a question about the order and we know something is wrong, please speak up, because we're here to protect the public. Supervisory liability. That is something, like I told you guys back in the day, when people were put on restriction of their license, they could not carry the narcotics key. That is considered supervisory. Somebody had to watch your every move to make sure that you do what you need to do, to make sure that you are providing the best care for your patients. And they have to do follow-ups and do all these things. The next thing is going to be institutional liability. Some institutions carry insurance on you. Some of them, they don't. Like I said, it's your responsibility for yourself to take care of your own livelihood. Who might have liability? Responsibility in the claim. Students. Right now, while you're in school, that liability insurance is covered on you through your tuition in the program. That's why the fees and stuff went up, because we need to be able to cover you if something was to happen. Communicate with us if you're with one of the nurses and something is happening and something don't feel right and we're with another student. Open your mouth and say something, because we can't interject anything or help you if you don't say something. Please communicate with us effectively. You have statute of limitations, assumption of risk, and contributory negligence. Some lawsuits have a statute of limitations. If something happened in 1989 and they come back and they say, well, I want to sue in 2024, they can't. They've met their statute of limitations based on whatever's going on at the time. Assumption of risk, like I said, if they assume that you have done something and the company is not sure, they're going to put you out on paid administrative leave to make sure they can investigate, to make sure that you are cleared and they're cleared of all charges. If you are found guilty of that, then you will be dismissed. Medical records is very, very important when we're documenting the patient medical records. We want to make sure that we document accordingly. Certain things can and cannot go in that medical record. So you have to be careful what's in the medical record. And like when we allow you all to chart, we check behind you guys to make sure that you're not willy-nilly just mashing buttons or clicking things or clicking what other people have done, because that's going to get you in trouble. If you don't learn nothing else from me or any instructor in this program, do not document what nobody else has already documented, because 9 times out of 10, they have not documented effectively. I told y'all about the time I had a patient, they had to have an amputation. And when the patient had his amputation done and people were still charting that the man had a leg. The man did not have a leg. He didn't have anything. Nothing. Okay? And how I found that out was because when I was doing my students, checking her chart and everything, and I'm like, and it was a patient I had recently taken, and I was like, this, I said, did you pull the covers back? She was like, yes, ma'am. I said, so you got your patient a bed bath? Yes, ma'am. I said, okay, let's go to the room. We go to the room, pull the covers back, man ain't got no legs. But you just sat here and charted because you charted what everybody else had charted. So in turn, Joint Commission was coming in, and Joint Commission like tearing those type of charts up. Anybody that had any kind of limbs removed, because they want to make sure the nurses have documented accordingly. So I had to have my nursing student to fix her charting, and I sent her home, and I wrote her up because that's false documentation. Yes, I did. Because she did not do what she's supposed to do, because she sat there and she lied in my face and told me she did these things and she did not. And this was a patient I had taken care of previously. I had to go back and find all those nurses that had charted after the amputation had been done that the man still had legs. I had to go find them to fix the chart. And guess what happened? When Joint Commission came in, that was the chart that they pulled. That's the chart that they pull. So that's why we check behind you all. When we say we've already assessed the patients, that's exactly what we mean. We have already assessed the patients. We want to see if you're going to be honest to do the right thing. Because if we feel like that you're not honest to do the right thing, then we can't allow you to pass the program. All right, medication error. That's the first thing that we learned in nursing 1. You got to know the 5 rights. You got to know the right patient, right time, right route, all of those things. And you have to know that certain medication cannot be crushed. You will see nurses around that crushing Protonix. Protonix cannot be crushed. That is like the main drug that they like to crush. Cannot crush Protonix. There is an IV form of Protonix that they have to have it. You need to call the doctor and you need to get the order. Some of y'all that went to clinical with me last semester, we had that same issue. I made y'all go back and call the nurse and tell them to get us an IV version of it, or they was not giving it, because I was not about to crush them Protonix, and they were not either. So make sure that you know how the medicine is supposed to be given and make sure that you're giving it correctly. How can I avoid a malpractice claim? Keep your patient safe. Clear as day. Making sure equipment works correctly. Make sure there's no hazardous chemicals laying around. Make sure that when you stick your patient with the needle, that you're capping it correctly, that you're putting the safety cap on correctly that's attached to the needle. Just making sure that you're doing everything properly to keep yourself and being named in a suit. Making sure that the patients don't fall. If I know my patient is a fall risk, I'm going to have them at the front desk. I'm going to have a fall brand on them. I'm going to make sure that their door is open at all times. I'm going to make sure they have the mats down. I'm going to make sure that the bed alarm is on. I'm going to make sure that nothing happens to that patient while I am there. That is the second named lawsuit that nurses are named in, is when a patient falls. An example is when I worked at Baptist. We had a patient that was in a sling. They had to change the bed out, had the patient in a ceiling lift, let the patient up in the ceiling lift while they was trying to maneuver the beds, and the patient had a phobia of heights, flipped out of the sling, smashed his head up real bad, ended up in the ICU. A prudent nurse would have known to put the patient in a chair, not to leave the patient up in the air. But the nurse had stepped away from the room because her patient called out for pain medicine, and she was on the assumption that the 2 techs could handle it. At the end of the day, the patient is responsibility of the nurse, not of the techs. Yes, the techs got fired because they had already been educated on you don't leave the patient up in the air, and somebody has to be in the room. You can't leave the patient room to try to maneuver beds out of the room. So they got fired. The nurse got in trouble, and her insurance was hit on that. The hospital is not going to cover you on that because that's something that you're trained and known on. They will drop you and say, no, we're not paying that claim. You have to pay that claim because you knew better. So make sure that the patient stays safe at all times. Making sure the equipment failure is done. Like I said in the past, make sure that your patients don't bring stuff from home like fans and warming blankets and all these things with electrical tape wrapped around it. They can put in a socket. That can cause harm not only to you, but also harm to the patient and everybody else that's on the unit, especially if a fire breaks out. How can I avoid a malpractice claim? Make sure that you're charting appropriately. Make sure that everything is in order appropriately. Make sure that you're communicating effectively. That is the main thing. Communication is the key. Failure to monitor and do all these things are going to cause the problems of you being named in a lawsuit. Like I said, communication is key. Communicate with your doctors, communicate with the patient, communicate with the family, communicate with everybody that's involved in that patient's care. Not with little Peter that's working on 3E. He ain't got nothing to do with what we got going on 6C. Okay? Make sure that you're communicating with the people that needs to be communicated with. Failure to report. If I know something is going on with my patient, or if I know somebody's committing Medicaid fraud, I can be held liable also, and I can get in trouble. We went over that yesterday. Y'all want to know about the communicable disease, why I needed to contact the infectious disease patient first before giving them the Tylenol, whatever like that. We're protecting the public. If my patient has a communicable disease, I need to put them in isolation, number one, because I need to isolate them to make them safe. Number two, I need to report because I need to find out who other people they have been around because they may be spreading the disease also. Number three, then I need to be getting an order to be able to take care of that patient effectively. And then once everything is ruled out, then we're in business. But if I don't follow those correct steps, I can cause problems along the way. So that is why you have to follow the order of prioritization. And that's what we're teaching you, to critically think. Safety first, safety all day long. Y'all know I eat, sleep, and breathe safety because that's what boys are going to have on the test, and they need to make sure that you are a safe nurse to take care of our clients in the community. Intentional tort, like I said, we talked about that, and that's defamation of liability and slander. Assault and battery, we talked about that. False imprisonment, we talked about that. I'm not going to go over those. We went over that the other day. Make sure you make yourself familiar with those terms. We talked about intentional confidentiality, invasion of privacy. We do not take pictures of our clients on our personal devices. If you do, that is the property of whatever facility that you're working at. They don't care nothing about that being your phone. Do not do that. Now, if a patient wants to take a picture with you on their devices, that's different. That's their phone. But we do not take any pictures on our personal devices. It has to be a device of the facility. We do not talk about our patient's life or anything like that in public. We try to remain neutral of everything. We do not allow our patients to follow us on social media. We don't follow them on social media. We got to have that distance. We got to set boundaries when we're doing the things that we're doing when we're taking care of our patients. Miscellaneous intentional tort, that's like sexual harassment. You got to make sure that you keep yourself safe from your patients, because you do have some patients like the Philly touchy or whatever like that. Make sure that you are keeping yourself safe, and make sure that you report that, because if you do not report it, and if that patient get upset with you, then they can say that you was sexual harassing them, and they're going to believe the patient before they believe you, especially if you did not report it first. Informed consent. Informed consents have to be signed by the physician at all times. The physician is responsible for that. However, nurses will get an informed consent done. At UMC, our doctors, if we have anything that has to be consent, they sign that for us. At Baptist, the doctors will talk to them about the procedures, and then we go and ask them that they have any questions, and then we get the consent signed. But once again, know your policy and procedures or whatever facility that you're working at, so you'll know how to safely not be named in any kind of lawsuit. Advanced directives is one of those things that they always ask patients all the time. Do you have advanced directives, living will, or power of attorney? So they know how to proceed accordingly to the patient's in the life decisions and medical provisions. Criminal acts that pose a risk to the nurse. Steph, please don't steal nothing from the patient. If you know your patient has $500 in the room, we need to get that $500 at the room, especially if it's not going home with family. At Baptist, we let security come up. Myself, the security officer, and the patient, we count the money together. We write down the number of each type of bills. We drop it in the envelope. We put it in a sealed envelope. I sign, they sign, the patient sign, and it goes down. It's locked up in security, and they get it on when they get ready to leave. Make sure that you know what you can and cannot do on the nursing practice violations and violation of the Food and Drug Act. And that's just pretty much knowing what medications goes with what, and make sure that you're handling the medication accordingly. Like I gave y'all the example of Protonix. We know for a fact that Protonix cannot be crushed, but we do have an IV version of it. That is the way of knowing that you're giving the medication the way that it's supposed to be given. Quality insurance, these peer review. We do all these things with our jobs. They may do an evaluation on your 3 months, 6 months, or a year. That determines, are you a risk to the patients? Are you a good nurse? Are you doing what you're supposed to do? Like my husband tell my kids, you don't have any friends. You have associates when you're working, because they may be the main one. They may give you a bad peer review because they mad because you got a raise, or you got nurse of the month or daisy of the month, and you really hadn't done anything. So be mindful. Treat everybody accordingly when you're working with everybody. Like I said, you just treat everybody the way you want to be treated, and you won't have any problems going forward. Risk management is something that we have at work, and risk management only handles different things to determine if we've done something wrong, like a centennial event. So a centennial event is like that example of the nurse when the patient fell out the sling, right? So we document that the patient had a fall, but we did not document in the patient's chart and say that an incident report was done. Because if you write that in the medical record that we also did an incident report, if we go to court, they're going to want that incident report. That incident report is the property of that facility. It is able to allow us to navigate what happened, what went wrong, so it could be a teachable moment so it does not happen again. That does not go in the chart. Yes, we chart the fall. Yes, we chart everything we've done for the patient, but we do not chart. Listen to me good. Do not write in that chart or type in that chart that an incident report was also done. That does not go in the medical record, because that would tear you apart if you have to go to be put on the stand. Risk management. We always apologize. The patients get tired of us apologize, but all we can do is apologize. I'm sorry that this happened. What can I do to make it better? That's what the lawyers and stuff are for, especially if we have to go to court or anything like that. But as long as you've done what you're supposed to do, that a prudent nurse is supposed to do, a competent nurse is supposed to do, you won't have any problems at all. Individual malpractice insurance, like I told you before, it is not expensive at all. So the highest that it could be anywhere from $50 up to $100 and some a month. Depends on the package that you get and what you want to get. Me personally, if you know that you're going to go back and you want to advance your degree, just go ahead and get the highest package and call it a day. They can take it out once a month, or they can take it out at the end of the year. Either way to go, you need to make sure that you have your own personal insurance on yourself, so if something happened, you can be covered. What should you know about institutional coverage? The institution can drop you and pick you up at any time. This is a hire for fire state. They have the right to do whatever they want to do. So long as you're covered on your own recognizance, then you shouldn't have any problems. If you have to go to court, 95% of personal injury is settled out of court. If you have your insurance that you're supposed to have to cover yourself, you do not have to go to court, because your insurance will work on your behalf. Now, if you are named in a bunch of lawsuits and they have to pay out a bunch of claims, then your insurance will also drop you. They will drop you because they're like, okay, we can't keep covering this nurse because they're doing some shady stuff and we just can't be paying out this money. All right, so what happens when we go to court? We want to look professional. Scrubs are considered professional. But we're going to have our black suit on, our heels, our suit, whatever it is, because we are going to be sitting looking pretty, because we know if we get named in the claim and we've done everything that we're supposed to do and we've documented appropriate, then we will be fined. It's just that we're there because we took care of the patient, but the main corporate is there, but we have to be there also. And they'll ask us questions about what happened. And as long as you have documented appropriately, you are fine. Healthcare costs and payment issues are questionable by the physician visit code. So they do the billing. We don't do any billing. So whatever the doctors say, that's pretty much how that's billed out. So we just have to kind of like know how the healthcare is maneuvered for our patient, how payments are issued out. Healthcare delivery issues, you have things on the outpatient and same day surgery. The roles and responsibility for is educating our patients on when they go home. The best time to educate your patient is going to be before surgery, because they're able to take all the information in. I told y'all about telephone triaging. I gave y'all an example about my patient under the documentation piece, when I triaged that patient and told them what they need to do. And then you have your utilization review. Those are a bunch of nurses that go through and they make sure that the physicians are not trying to overcharge the patient's insurance, and then make sure that we have documented appropriately to make sure that the patients are getting the adequate care and that their insurance is paying the facility appropriately. If our documentation does not match, then the facility is not going to pay for the services of the client, and the client is left paying the bill, and that's something that we do not want. Also, you need to make yourself familiar with the issues about the end of life decision for abortion, fetal rights, human experimentation research, which I kind of covered that with y'all in chapter 19. This is the end of our presentation for chapter 20. If you have any questions, please reach out to me via email, and you all enjoy the rest of your weekend.